Welcome everybody to this webinar organized by the European Heat Adaptation Community and the Klimaatverbond, the Climate Alliance in the Netherlands. This is the webinar at which and there will be some beeps coming in from new people to attend. This webinar is the second webinar we organized from the Heat Adaptation Community, the European Heat Adaptation Community. My name is Madeleine Helmer. I'm the moderator of this community, which by now has more than 125 participants from about 16 countries in the EU, in Europe. And this is the second webinar aiming to address issues that are quite new for the heat adaptation community at large. We are, I checked by now, people from 20 countries who attend this webinar, and we're about 130. The large majority is from European participants, mainly from municipalities, knowledge centers and others. And the reason for that is because the European Heat Adaptation Community comes from the Netherlands community of practice on heat. So that is a strong link, and we evaluate into this European organization way of networking. The issue of today, the subject of today is people working in extreme heat. And we've taken this up because working on heat for the last couple of years, it has been mainly focused on the largest group of people vulnerable on heat, which are the elderly. So many heat health action plans are in many countries focused on the elderly, on awareness raising for the elderly in their homes and what they can do to protect themselves, and how can their families and caretakers do to protect themselves. While we learn more about heat, we also learn that the group of people being vulnerable to heat stress is increasing, and we don't keep up with it. And one of the largest groups we have in the picture, and we don't know a lot about, are people working in hot places. And this is the topic of this webinar. And we're very happy to have a few excellent speakers who've been working on this for a longer time. The keynote speaker will be Matthijs Nieuwenhuis from the La Isla Network, a global network who has been far beyond all of us to focus on this topic, and he will take off this webinar. The second is Mamen Marquez from Spain, the union UGT, who is one of the hotspots, you could say, on people who've been affected, working people being affected by heat. And she's very kind to share her knowledge, how at the union level in Spain, their approach has been developed in the last couple of years. And finally, the overall European approach will be presented by Ignacio Doreste from the European Union organization syndicates, who have taken up heat particularly as well in the last couple of years. So we know from the worker side what's going on. But since we also have a large history with municipalities, we looked at how heat risk has been addressed by municipalities and their workers in the Netherlands. And my colleague Helene Janik will give a kind of analysis, a kind of observations on how we did that and where we are with the municipalities, the municipalities who work on heat and how they take care of their own workers during heat. And we have not yet addressed the issue, but that will be part of the discussion on how procurements and tendering processes can be helpful to increase the rights and the protection of workers during heat waves. And I'm also very happy that Jan Popma is in the call. He's been working on heat risk and doing some studies, and we asked him after the presentation to share some of his observations on this topic, where we are and where we can go to and what could be shortcuts to get there. So, no further ado, you're most welcome. What will happen with this webinar, it will be online. All the participants, all those who are not attended, because that we learned from the COP Heat, the Community of Practice Heat in the Netherlands. Many people watch it afterwards, and presentations will be shared, and Q&A from the chat will be noted. So we encourage all of you with your knowledge or documents, doesn't matter what language it is, we take it all because we have good translation apps. Please put them in the chat. Questions, put them in the chat. And we look forward for 2 interesting discussions, one in the chat and one online with the presentations. With no further ado, Matthijs, may I ask you to give your presentation?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for organizing this important webinar. It's really nice to see that you are bringing together people from across Europe to talk about this extremely interesting but also worrying issue of extreme heat. Heat is very urgent in Europe. It's a European problem today. Climate change is here and it's not going away. And it's, as you said, not only a risk for the elderly, but for millions and millions of people working every day in heavy physical conditions in the heat. And municipalities, provinces, and companies have a bigger role to play than most currently realize. So my name is Matthijs Nieuwenhuis. I'm the Director of European Development at La Isla Network. I'm based in the Netherlands. I'm Dutch, as you might hear already. But we are a global and science-based not-for-profit organization focusing on occupational health and safety. And we have dedicated our work to protecting workers from extreme heat. So everything we do is data-driven and evidence-based. We conduct field research. We are measuring physiological responses of workers in real-life conditions. So we develop protocols based on that data. And we work together with companies, governments, research institutions to implement and embed those protocols to actually protect the workers' health. I often speak with companies. We have a lot of business partners. Today we'll focus my presentation a bit more also on the government level. So we work across agriculture, construction, manufacturing, mining, textiles, and other sectors. And we have teams on multiple continents like Asia, Africa, Central and South America, but also in Europe and the US, because of the climate change and the extreme weather conditions we starting to get to know here as well. And we have partnerships with leading universities and institutions. So don't forget today, please, and also the next weeks and months in your work, this is not a problem of the global south or maybe Spain and Italy in the south of Europe. It's a Northern European and Western European issue as well. We are all at risk. To explain a bit more about heat stress and what's already known, I wanted to share some details from an ILO report that has been published in 2024. What we see here is the scale of the impact of extreme heat on the workforce. You see that 2.4 billion workers are already exposed to excessive heat. 23 million people injured at the job every day. Every year, sorry, I have to say every year, not every day, unfortunately. And that will lead to up to 80 million jobs lost by 2030. Jobs lost by the most vulnerable among us, of course. And the cost will rise up to 2.4 trillion US dollars. And that's something with a lot of zeros that I can't even grasp, to be honest. I'm not going to the next slide, but let me fix this. Yes, here I am. So we tend to think that heat stress is a problem of maybe farm workers in hot countries in Africa. It's not the case anymore. We are talking about construction workers, transportation workers, first responders, tourism. Many sectors are affected, but also think about waste collection or street maintenance, park and green space workers, people working in warm indoor environments like factories or maybe event sites. These workers are present in every European city already today, and many of them are also directly employed or indirectly employed by the public sector. I have some more dark numbers to share with you. Europe is warming up at twice the global average. And it's heating faster than expected. And the 3 warmest years ever recorded on our continent have all occurred since 2020. So it's safe to say this is a workforce health issue right now. And also, this crisis, this health crisis, is already happening across Europe. It's also accelerating. The evidence from across the continent is very, very clear. More workers are dying every day, and as you see in the slide, not only in the south of Europe, but also up north. Very interesting example that in 2023, 5 workers died, but also up north in France already, and we've seen people deaths as well in Germany. So this slide is also very troubling, I have to say. We talked about what is already known, what is not known yet. There's a lot of information available. There's a lot of information on this slide. I'm not gonna all discuss it with you, but I wanted to show some of them, share some of them with you, and you can check the slides later if you want. Almost all regions in Europe, they see an increased heat-related mortality. 820 of 823. So only 3 regions didn't see the increase in heat-related mortality. And the EU workplace deaths from heat have risen 42% since the year 2000. And that's faster than anywhere in the world. But this is a crisis. It's getting in the headlines now of the newspapers. And it won't be going away. We see accidents and deaths reported throughout Europe. So I wanted to take a moment of your time to give a very simplified explanation about what heat stress actually is. It's important to understand a bit of it because then you understand better what you actually can do about it. So heat stress is not just about the outside temperature in Celsius, like it's 28 degrees Celsius outside. It's a very hot day. It might be it might be dangerous for the people working or for the elderly. But it's also about the wind. It's about solar radiation, humidity, and air temperature. And if you combine that with the internal heat that your body produces, and that also depends on the type of work you do. You see here a roofer in the construction. They do very heavy physical work. So the internal muscular temperature also will rise faster. So the combination between the weather conditions and the work, the job you're doing, makes the risk real and also rising fast. So heavy outdoor labor in the sun can push a worker's core body temperature already above the 38 degrees Celsius. Also on a day that feels cooler for us working maybe in an office. I mentioned the 38 degrees Celsius. It's really important for workers to keep the core body temperature below the 38 degrees Celsius. That is the threshold we work to keep workers below. Above that 38 degrees Celsius, risk of kidney damage, accidents, heat stroke rises sharply. The good news is, though, I'm starting to get to the good news of this presentation. The good news is we can. We know how to do it. We know what to do. It takes the right protocols and the willingness to implement them. That might not be easy, but it has been done and it can be done. So I wanted to share some of the results of the work of Liaison Network. I will just skip through them really quickly. So we built an intervention model based on prevention of illnesses and injuries, and making also by reducing the risk that the workforce is resilient. Also looking at the productivity and the efficiency of the work, because people, of course, need to work because we need to build our houses and we need to produce food. And also look at the long-term protection, looking at policy and access to care and services. To keep it practical for this audience that might be new with the subject, some core elements of what we do in practice is a protocol that can be pretty straightforward with rest, shade, hydration, and hygiene. So often workers need more frequent and shorter breaks instead of one long lunch break. They need clean drinking water nearby and accessible throughout the entire day. And they need shade, probably shade where they can have their breaks. And that should be near or at the worksite. And also, last but certainly not least, the hygiene facilities that work for everyone are really important, especially looking at female workers that need to have those facilities also to keep safe. These are not expensive innovations. They are proven, they are scalable, they can be implemented. We have tested and developed the workplace protocols together with companies and governments and show that you actually can protect workers' health and also keep people working even when it's a warmer day. So we developed this at our Center of Excellence in Nicaragua. That's where we tested the protocols. It took us years and years to get them exactly right. But the results have been published and also independently verified. So what you see, the effect here is of more shorter breaks. They will lead to a lower core body temperature and they keep people healthy. People started working less. That's the yellow line. They started working less and less and less. And what you see after a couple of years that actually they were not producing less, but producing more, almost double their production because they were healthy, they were fit. This all led to also a positive return on investment because a lot of companies and governments also take into account, of course, okay, what does this cost? There's a lot of investment might maybe have to be done to come to these new protocols. And that's actually has proven not to be true because the return on investment after already only 3 years was 60%. So the short summary, 80% reduction in illnesses related to heat. We saw a decrease in chronic kidney disease, increased productivity, and a positive ROI. So the positive effects of our Center of Excellence, of the work we developed, is that you see lower staff turnover, less absenteeism, less accidents, reduced hospital care, and also just a healthier workforce. So this is good for workers. It's also a business case, to be honest. It applies not just to companies, but also to any organization that employs outdoor workers, including the public sector. Maybe a nice example from Spain. We're also going to Mamen in Spain later on after my presentation. We did some interesting work with Sainsbury's from the UK and G's Fresh from Spain. And what we found there that this company had a pretty good protocol, safety protocol in place, had a dedicated occupational safety and health team, but still we found significant gaps working together with the companies. Breaks and shade were insufficient, water supplies were too far away, and only the data revealed risk that weren't visible without the proper measurements we did. So after the work we did together with those two amazing companies, because they invested in making clear what their challenges were, they made some changes in their workforce. The company actually changed their policies. So they got more shade, more seatings. They changed their PPEs, sort of protectional gear that people are wearing, got a new hydration protocol, and adjusted their work schedule. So that's a really interesting and also inspiring example from Europe. And we're also taking this further up north the continent. So we are part of a research consortium that will measure heat and UV exposure among workers later this year in the Netherlands. We will be launching it in a couple of weeks, so I can't talk too much about it. That's really interesting that we'll be doing research as well up north in Europe. So this is important for municipalities and provinces. So often we talk to companies, we learn a lot from them, but this is really important for this group of organizations as well. You do have real influence. You do have a real opportunity to make a positive impact on lives of thousands and thousands of workers in your own line of work and in your own region or city. So what can you do? One, you employ workers who are today exposed to heavy heat every working day. People that work in parks, green space maintenance, waste collection, roadworks, first responders, transport, all those workers are your responsibility. So you can start tomorrow by measuring and mapping the risk you have of heat exposure to the different people working within your organization or for your organization. And if you know where your risks are, you can act. You can develop specific protocols per job type, per region. And you can start adjusting work schedules and make sure that there's sufficient drinking water and breaks and shade as I showed before. Number two, please use your procurement to drive standards. So when you commission any construction work or in the infrastructure or any outdoor service that you need, you can require contractors to have a heat stress policy in place. Make it a tender requirement so you have real power. And we see this happening already in some EU countries. We see some companies doing this. It doesn't cost much to include if you know what you're talking about, but it forces an entire sector to take the issue seriously. It protects workers that are more often very vulnerable. So public procurement is one of the most powerful and underused tools available to local and regional governments. Please use it. And do not wait for national legislations to be there. You can start doing it already. It takes time, it takes an effort to develop it, but you can, and I think that you should set the example. So we need the public sector to be part of the solution and start acting. Before I stop talking, let me close with a personal message that I think, speaking to all of you, that no one should get sick or even die because of doing their job, because of building our houses, getting the food that we eat every day on our tables, or providing a public service to us. So I think that's the basic principle. And yet today in Europe, 2026, workers are still dying in vineyards, in construction sites, in cities every day. We have the knowledge, we have the science, the data, the protocols. The only thing we need is the will to act on every level, including the level that you act on. So I hope that this helps start things moving, and let's take this seriously and act on, and let's do what we can. So thank you for now. I'm happy to take any questions later on in the webinar and be listening.
Thank you so much, Matthijs. This has been a very helpful overview of this very new issue that we are looking at for most of us, and municipalities mainly that are part of our community. It's a good overview to start acting, and it resonates really with what we've doing so far on local heat health action plans. The measures are so simple and it affects so many people. So that's what we have in common in this story. Mamen, I would like to move to you in Spain. And we already agreed that when needed, Ignacio will step in to help on the language. But feel comfortable, because in this large community, we're used to many forms of English. So that's no problem at all. And I see you already opening your screen. That's great. One more. Almost there. Yes, there you are. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to participate in this webinar and for giving UGT of Catalonia the opportunity to share our experience. We are grateful that you consider UGT of Catalonia for this event. Before we begin, we would like to apologize in advance for my English, and unfortunately, it seems to get a little worse every year, and I have fewer opportunities to practice. For this reason, I'm very grateful to have the support of my colleague, Elia Varela, from our international department, who will help me if I get stuck of any pain point.
So far, very good, Mamen. No worry, go on.
Thank you very much. You are a good amphitryon. So, UGT of Catalonia is the Catalan branch of UGT, one of Spain's largest trade unions. It represented workers across all sectors of the economy in Catalonia and works to protect labor rights, improve working conditions, and promote occupational health and safety. UGT is actively involved in social dialogue with the government of Catalonia, employers, organizations, and other stakeholders. It also develops guidance, training programs, and policy proposals of emergency workplace changes, including climate change adaptation, and the prevention of health-related occupation risks. So in today's webinar, I will focus in 3 case areas. First, how health risk is managed in Spain. Second, the Spanish legal and regulatory framework on health exposure. And third, the initiatives and actions developed by UGT of Catalonia to protect workers. So first, I would like to explain how health risks is managed in Spain, including the warning systems, the institutional framework, and the preventive measures that are active during periods of extreme heat. The first thing, we have 2 meteorological forecasting service in Spain. AEMET is the national event and Meteocat is in Catalonia. Both provide forecast and heat warnings that are used to activate preventive measures and help employers, authorities, and workers prepare for periods of extreme heat. The degree is determined by the ratio between the threshold that may exceed and the probability of the meteorological phenomenon occurring in the territory. The hardest weather situation is classified according to the degree of the danger in the scale 0 to 6, which are grouped in follow color traffic lights. When the percentile-based threshold are exceeded, 3 different warning levels can be activated, yellow, orange, and red. These alert levels reflect the severity of the health events and help authorities, employers, and workers take an appropriate preventive measures. These are the 90 percentile threshold on which the heat warning system is based. As you can see, along the coast, the temperature threshold for triggering alerts are generally lower than the in central of Catalonia and the Pyrenees. In this example for the last year, I took this map for the Catalonian heat warning system to illustrate how the alert works in the practice. As you can see, the coastal areas were under orange and the central is in yellow, but maybe we are in the same temperature. The Pyrenees are were in only areas shown in green, meaning that no heat warning was in place because temperatures were not considered extreme. You may also notice a red dot across part in the map. However, it was not related to heat. In this case, is used because the risk of several thunderstorms. This example shows how warning levels vary across the territory depending on the local climate conditional and the specific weather hazards affecting each area. The heat risk management is not a special type of risk. Like in another occupational hazard, it must be assessed, controlled, and prevented without appropriate workplace measure, like another risks. And we must do a risk assessment, understanding the factors that increase heat exposure, that vulnerability in the workplace is essential for protecting workers' health and safety. Heat risk is the result of a combination of factors, even when the external temperatures are relatively mild, workers may still be exposed to significant heat stresses because of heavy physical workloads, unsuitable clothing and PPE, poor ventilation, high humidity levels, or individual vulnerability factors. For this reason, a proper risk assessment must take all these elements into account rather than focusing solely on air temperature. These are the most common measures used to prevent health-related risk. Also, what's the Matthews show a lot of also. The most effective in climate control, such as an air conditioning, is the best. Preventing measures are generally divided into two categories: organizational measures, such as changing work schedules or reducing workload, and technical measures, such as installing shade structures, improving ventilation, or providing cool PPE. At UGT, we are strongly promoting the development of workplace heat management protocols. We believe companies should have heat management protocols in place at all times, not only during official alerts. During orange alert measures may include schedule change, task reassignment, workload reducing, additional breaks and hydration measurements. And during red alerts, companies may need to suspend certain activities or stop work altogether. Now, let us look at the legal framework that support these measures. Real Decreto 486 1997. Since this year, Spain had a specific regulation establishing the minimum health and safety requirements for workplaces. This regulation is derived from the European Occupational Safety and Health Framework Directive. Unfortunately, even today, many companies still fail to complete these requirements, particularly in warehouse and industrial facility where air conditioning has not been installed. Nobody would expect a company to operate during winter with heating. Yet in Spain, we still have many workplaces that lack the required cooling system during summer, despite the increasing impact of the extreme heat on workers' health and safety. This situation highlights the need to move beyond minimum compliance and adapt workplace to reality a warm climate. Unfortunately, in Spain, we tend to be quite reactive when it comes to introducing new regulations, increase about European regulations. Very often, a serious incident has to occur before the need for change becomes evident and legislation is updated or strengthened. This case concerns a street cleaning worker in Madrid who died from heat stroke while working outdoors. The tragedy received widespread media attention and exposed the lack of specific protection for workers facing extreme heat. As a result, new legislation was introduced the following year, strengthening the protection for outdoor workers and making a turning point in the recognition of heat as major occupational health and safety risks in Spain. This law for 2023, the legislation requires employers to carry out a health risk assessment for workers who perform their duties outdoors, and they implement the necessary preventive measures. As we discussed earlier regarding orange and red heat alerts, the legislation specifically established that measures must be taken when extreme heat events occur. These measures may include adapting work activity, modifying schedules, or, when necessary, suspending certain tasks to protect workers' health and safety. The key principle is that work must be organized in a way that presents health-related risks, and when those risks cannot be adequately controlled, work safety must take priority. Also, in 2024, the Dana floods that struck in Valencia caused around 30 deaths 230 deaths and affected tens of thousands of people. If you look at the photography in the bottom right corner, you will see the IKEA store in Valencia this day. IKEA had already done what the legislation now requires companies to do: take adverse weather events into account and integrate them into their occupational risk management and prevention systems. The legislation specifically requires companies to have a mandatory protocol for managing adverse weather events. These protocols must take into account a wide range for weather-related hazards in that may affect workers and business activity. In this context, we are not only about orange or red warnings. Adverse weather events can also include floods, strong winds, extreme temperatures such as heat or cold, hailstorms, quad storms, and other several weather phenomena. This objective is to ensure that companies anticipate these risks, can plan preventive measures in advance, and are prepared to respond effectively when such events occur. Also, we would like to present a guidance document designed to help companies develop their own health management protocols. In this case, it focuses specifically on health risks and was developed through collaborative process led by the government of Catalonia, which took the initiative to promote this work. The document was negotiated within the framework of social dialogue involving both employers' organization and workers' representative. In addition, it's very strange for us, local authority and municipality were also consulted and their perspectives taken into account. As a result, the guide reflects a broad consensus among the different stakeholders involved and provides practical recommendations for companies to implement effective health prevention measures. And as noticed that many of you work in the field of local government and administration, I would like to highlight one specific aspect of this guide: the contracting and outsourcing of public service. The guide emphasizes that public authorities must take health-related risks into account when designing, tendering, and managing outsourced service. Public administration, therefore, have a key role to play in ensuring that preventive measures against health are incorporated in the service contracts from the very beginning. From this point, I would like to present the materials that we have developed at UGT of Catalonia. We have been working on the management of occupational health risk of many years, long before health becomes such a prominent issue in public debate and legislation. Over the years, we have produced a wide range of guidance documents, awareness campaigns, practical tools, and training materials aimed at helping workers and workplace representatives understand health-related risks and implement effective preventive measures. The campaign is called UGT Heat. I have to admit that we are probably not going to win any awards for creativity when it comes to campaign names. As a general rule, we produce our material in Catalan, which is the official language of Catalonia. These are the communication materials developed by our communications team for social media campaigns. Their main objective is to raise awareness about health-related occupational risks and the importance of prevention. In fact, awareness of this use has grown exponentially in recent years. What was once considered a citizen's inconvenience is now increasingly recognized cited as a major occupational health and safety challenge linked to climate change. The materials show where the main gas we have developed, each covering in detail a specific topic related to heat risk prevention and protection in the workplace, including workers' rating awareness, heat risk assessment and prevention, workplace heat protocols, solar exposure at work, dehydration as preventive measure, working clothing, heat-adapted PPE, and cooling personal protective equipment, outdoor working during summer, heat stroke symptoms, and first aid. I would like to emphasize that all of these materials are available through the campaign website, where they are collected in a single localization. They are freely available and can be used by anyone interested in heat risk prevention and climate adaptation in the workplace. So please feel free to use them, and if they can be useful in your own work. Thank you very much for your attention. We will now happy to take any question if you may have.
Thank you so much, Mamen. This was very helpful and very broad, and will really help all of us who are just starting to work on this issue to move faster forward than you did. Could I ask you one question? Because that's what we run against in more northern European countries. Since heat is a new issue, the traditional reaction we have, it has always been hot. So when was the kind of turning point for you to really, with all the other environmental issues that a trade union has to deal with, when became the risk of heat on your radar, and how did you then organization-wise pick it up?
Yeah, it was maybe 5-6 years ago, because of the weather conditions becoming more and more extreme. That's when the peaks of heat started to become much more pronounced. And so even though trade unions were always working on these issues, at that time, UGT and others started pushing for the change in legislation, which came about in 2023. And as Mamen explained, came also because of high-profile media cases of workers dying due to heat. But it was mainly, the extreme weather phenomenon.
Añade que yo llevo 25 años trabajando aquí. Desde el primer momento siempre hemos atendido consultas de gente que pasa calor en sus empresas.
And Mamen has been working 25 years in the department of that covers also heat risk assessments and all these issues. And this has always been a topic of work and consultations and cases coming to her office. But yeah, it became more intense in the last 4 years.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the translation of the answer to the question. I'd like to move on to the next speaker, Ignacio Doreste, who works with the trade union at the European level, the ETUC. And also, if I note your work, it has also been a quite recent topic for the last 4 or 5 years, Ignacio, that you really started to work heavily on heat. And brought forward extensive programs and demands. I'm looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much to Klimaat Verbond for organizing this seminar. Indeed, we have been starting to work on this topic since 2020. When was it? Our first resolution was in 2018 at European level. Indeed, many of our members, as you may have heard from Mamen, have been working on this topic for many years already. Firstly, I wanted to have a short word on what the European Trade Union Confederation is. So we are a confederation of trade union confederations at a national level. We have members in many European countries beyond the European Union. So we also have members in Turkey or in Iceland. For your information, in the Netherlands, we have 3 member organizations, FNV, CNV, and the VAC Centrale for Professionals. Okay. Do you see the slides moving?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, well, I'm not going to get into the details on data because, I mean, the presentation of La Isla Network has already provided very good knowledge on that. But at TTUC, as said, I mean, it's already 7 years that we are monitoring the situation across the continent when it comes to particularly fatal accidents which are related to exposure to extreme heat. So here you have a couple of figures. We try to monitor the situation, particularly during the summer. We collect testimonies of workers, news, and we publish press releases. So the idea is to keep the momentum high so as to apply pressure towards the European Commission in order to have binding legislation to protect workers against exposure to these risks. I mean, it is with great sorrow, of course, that we are collecting this information, but we need to make use of it in order to be effective in our policy. This is something that we have been signaling to the European institutions frequently. And I mean, don't take me wrong. I mean, of course, European institutions do not remain untouched by this situation, but what we have seen so far is that the appetite to undertake legislative action has been extremely low. Basically, what we hear when we have been putting forth our demands towards the European Commission particularly is that the existing legal framework which exists at European level already provides for the necessary protection for workers against occupational heat. I mean, I don't want to annoy you with details on how European legislation on occupational safety and health is structured, but we have, I mean, I just want to say 3 things. One is that we have what we normally refer to as the model directive or the framework directive, which is a very good piece of legislation which was enacted in 1989. And it's very good. I mean, honestly, I don't think that we could manage to get such a forward-looking legislation in the current times. It establishes very strong principles on prevention with a strong and a strong role for trade unions and workers' participation, and also very ambitious responsibilities for the employers. What the Commission is saying is that this model directive already provides for the necessary framework to protect against heat as an occupational risk. And what we say is like, listen, I mean, clearly, I mean, the prevalence of related diseases, the fatal accidents that we are collecting, because I have already mentioned that we are having, you know, this collection of data, of news, of testimonies, because we have a problem also when it comes to collecting data. I mean, the data that we have from Eurostat is very fragmented. I mean, they are trying to improve that, but it's not available. For example, our colleagues from Greece, what they say is that accidents and diseases which are related to exposure to heat are nowhere to be seen in the statistics. So imagine, I mean, we are talking about a country which is quite at the south and actually is reporting many accidents. So all the data that we get from Greece is from our trade union contracts, is not coming from the government. So this legal explanation for us that the current legal framework already provides for us is not valid. Then something very important, there are, I mean, we have this model directive, and then we have what we refer to as daughter directives, directives which are perhaps addressing a specific risk or a specific groups of the workforce. The Commission sometimes say, okay, we have one daughter directive, which is called the workplace directive, and here you also have provisions on temperature comfort. Well, I don't want to get into the details of this in order not to annoy you again, but this directive, for example, has in its article on personal scope important limitations. So you have huge sectors which are excluded from the scope of applications of these directives. So this is all, to share with you how important it is to have dedicated legislation in order to tackle this problem. And then since 2023, the European Commission has been paying special attention to this, but as said already, not enough. And for example, in 2023, so 3 years ago, it was in May, the Commission asked the agency EUOSHA, the European Agency for the Prevention of Occupational Safety and Health, risks to provide guidelines for employers on the prevention of occupational heat. So these are available in all languages in the internet. They are quite good, but I mean, still we have this thing of guidelines. I mean, voluntary measures are not sufficient. We see it as again in the prevalence, in the numbers of workers who are passing away because of exposure to heat. So it is high time to have binding legislation. And this is our core demand, to have a dedicated directive. Directives, as you may know, it's a legal instrument at European level which makes it obligatory for member states to transpose within a period of time that directive into the legal national system. And our core demands, I mean, I'm going to explain this perhaps in more detail in the coming slides, is that we have some maximum working temperatures, which should be sector specific. I mean, we acknowledge that it cannot be the same for all workers. There is a need to guarantee consistent protection across member states. Actually, there are many countries already who have maximum working temperatures, particularly for outdoor workers. But this temperature varies enormously from one country to another. And then something that I haven't included in the slide is that, as you know, we should not only look at the temperature, but other indicators, for example, temperature, air fluid, and many others. It is important that the directive sets out clear enforceable obligations to employers. And this fourth point that I included in this slide is important. I am referring here to a Quality Jobs Act. At European level, I am positive that you are following these developments at national level as well, but we are in a very dire political situation. Is somehow mirroring what is happening in most of the European countries. There is a strong call from the co-legislators and the European Commission to put the focus on deregulation, simplification, with a lot of explanations / excuses to the current geopolitical situation, by which basically no more social legislation is being enacted. And what is even worse is that the existing social legislation is under threat, is on the spotlight to be deregulated. In these difficult times, we have a window of opportunity, which is the promise of President Ursula von der Leyen and the Commissioner for Employment and Social Affairs, Rosana Misato, to have a Quality Jobs Act. So far, this is only a promise, but I mean, the work is already ongoing. And in principle, this is something which is going to be published end of this year, beginning of next year. And whereas we are calling for an individual directive on the occupational heat, in the current circumstances, we understand that the best that we can get now is to have a strong provisions on the protection of workers against not only heat, but all extreme weather events as part of this Quality Jobs Act. So on this particular piece of legislation is where we are focusing all our efforts in this moment. Let me move to the next slide. Yes, these are some of our demands. The previous slide I have skipped it. We believe that it is very important to put the focus on the prevention, not on healing. And for this, there is a need to have a tailored risk assessment, tailored when it comes to the risk, because there is an obligation, a general obligation for employers across the union to undertake a risk assessment of all risk. But we know that when you have specific obligations for particular risk, then employers are more prone, when not obliged, to do it. So there is a need to have this risk assessment, which should be tailored to extreme weather, extreme temperatures, and also to enshrine in the legislation the stop approach. The stop approach provides for some hierarchy in the measures which should be undertaken at company level. And for us, the most important one, of course, first thing that you should do is to try to substitute the risk. However, we cannot eliminate the sun. And here, well, I am talking about the possibility sometimes to reschedule work. However, I mean, this should be done in agreement and consultation with trade unions. I mean, this thing of the heat should not be an excuse for workers to decide to change the production from the overnight to work during a night shift. And then to have technical organizational measures, and then the last level in this stop hierarchy approach is the provision of personal protective equipment. Let me move to the next slide. Very important is that the trade unions are given a strong voice in this process. I'm going to jump to the next slide. On some of the key employers' obligations, I already referred to the most important one, which is perhaps conducting this risk assessment. These are things which I believe have already been said before, but I mean, some measures are related to providing hydration, acclimatization. This is something which has been commented by Mamen. Also, the provision of cooled areas. Something very important is that the pace of work should be adapted to the temperature and the weather. This is extremely important. Let me move to the next slide, please. By the way, I wanted to mention that at the beginning, when we started to work on this, we noticed that there was a huge misunderstanding when discussing this topic, particularly with other stakeholders like the employers. At the beginning, there was this idea that when talking about preventing occupational heat, very costly measures should be implemented. I think that the employers had this idea in mind that they should provide for some kind of personal protective equipment similar to the one which is used by metal workers, this gear which is, providing for cooling for these metal workers which are exposed to very intense sources of heat. And it is not about that. It's about light clothing, again, shading area, hydration. Something which is very important for us is the need for medical monitoring. This is very important, first of all, to protect the workers, but also to keep good track of the situation at the company level, and also to have good statistics, because we have a huge issue of underreporting of occupational accidents in general, let alone when we are talking about exposure to occupational heat. And all workers in the European Union have a right, it's an individual right, which is called the right to withdraw labor. So if a worker, he or she, acknowledges that he's going to put him or himself at risk, they are entitled to not to work and still be protected. However, it goes without saying that there is a huge bargaining inequality between a worker and an employer. So this is the last resource, but we wanted to see this reflected in in the European legislation on this topic, that there is a reminder that as a last resource, workers are entitled to the right to withdraw labor. Something very important is to have a gender-sensitive approach, not gender-neutral, gender-sensitive. Here I was mentioning personal protective equipment, but not only. I mean, we should bear in mind the situation of workers, we call it the 3M, I mean, the maternity, menstruation, and menopause. Also, the legislation should have the broadest possible application when it comes to the personal scope. I was referring here to all outdoor workers, seasonal and migrant workers, very importantly, domestic workers. This is extremely important because domestic workers are excluded from the scope of application of European OSH legislation. And this is something which is totally unacceptable. If you take all households together, in the European Union, I mean, households where you have domestic workers, it would be the biggest employer in the European Union. And these workers are excluded from this fundamental right to occupational safety and health. And then very important, the need to enforce this legislation. And for this to happen, the Labour Inspectorate should be well equipped in terms of financial and human resources, but also equipped in terms of powers. In many countries, Labour inspectors do not have, the capacity to undertake independent investigations. They are subject to some kind of preliminary calls to the employer. So, I mean, imagine what kind of labor law enforcement you can do if you should announce the arrival of the visit with 2-week time. So sorry if I spoke too much. This was all from my side, and thank you very much again for the invite.
Thank you, Ignacio. And this is becoming such a wealthy webinar with all the knowledge all three of you are sharing with us. It really, I think, I say it for myself, and I've been onto this topic for a while. So many new insights that all three of you bring. So that's very, very welcome. And it's kind of first step on a long way to go. We realize as well, but it does give at least me, and I suppose some of the others as well, new insights. But also it all comes down to how do we organize our knowledge into action. So while we see on Heat that a lot of knowledge is increasing, but the key question is the process of strengthening the operational and the implementing side of it. So this has been very helpful. And to make the link, I mean, one question to you. Of course, you mainly link between the rights of workers towards employees. Do you partner up, because also at the European level, the municipalities also have organized themselves of many issues? Is there a kind of relationship on your work with the work of municipalities, what they're doing on climate adaptation in general and more on heat? Ignacio?
Yes. I wanted to ask you whether this is a question for me or for all the speakers. Well, our members do, but for example, Mamen explained the work that they are doing at regional and local level on this topic. At ETUC, I mean, we can, somehow follow with interest, I mean, get inspiration to coordinate or put together the knowledge of our members, but our scope of application is rather European. But again, I mean, we very much are very much aware of the fact that a lot can be achieved at this regional and local level. References have been made, for example, to public procurement. This is also a very interesting avenue for enforcing these rights, these protections. Thank you.
Yeah, but you do not know of cases where public procurement did include the heat protection measures for workers?
Well, I believe, correct me if I am wrong, in Groningen, in the Netherlands, for example. Huh. Yeah, I may be wrong, okay, but this is something that I recently learned. And I don't know, perhaps Mamen has more information about this, about public procurement in the construction sector in Catalonia, whether there are some kind of protection provisions on this topic. I mean, honestly, at this moment for us, this is more a theoretical call than something that we are already witnessing at a local level. But it's a very good point. I think that this merits some follow-up across our members.
Thank you.
Hicimos un pro-
Mamen?
hicimos un protocolo, hay un protocolo que se firmó con la tabla de construcción para cómo se tiene que gestionar el calor específica de construcción. Como es
Yeah,
protocolo,
there is a
convenio, está dentro del convenio.
there is a specific protocol about heat risk management with the construction sector, but it's within the collective agreement of this sector.
So, se convierte en ley. Y todo lo que no sea ley es que vamos a la voluntad de las que ha dicho ella, del conocimiento.
Yeah, and so Mamen is saying that the important thing on how to translate knowledge and data is laws, because when it's too broad, then it's not actionable. So there need to be laws and regulations with specific measures and specific rules for how to deal with it. Because if it's just, oh, make a general assessment or adapt, then it doesn't work if it's too soft or advisory.
Yeah.
It has to be translated into law.
Que sí, que puede ser law y puede ser convenio, o sea, pero...
Well, law or collective agreements, but it has to be stipulated.
Thank you. And this is also the bridge to Helene and the kind of mini survey we did among the 16 the municipalities in our network in the Netherlands, because we thought, let's ask them, how do they use heat in their with, at least within other heat protocols for your own workers and your own municipalities. And it was quite hard, Helene, to get an answer. And we said, no, we pushed them a little bit harder. Come on, you're part of the community. Reply now. So finally they did, 24 of them. And please give us the kind of observations you made from their answers.
Yes, thank you. And you will hear me through the laptop of my colleagues. So indeed, we sent a short survey to our Dutch community of practice heat around 3 questions. The first being, does your organization have a heat protocol in the first place? And then if so, during a heat wave, is compliance with the heat protocol monitored? And then lastly, is the heat protocol sufficiently known internally? So in the organization internally, is it clear who serves as the designated point of contact for the workers? And on this survey, we received 17 replies, and actually slightly less than half of our organization, so it was 7, answered that they do have a heat protocol. And most of our respondents indicated that they are not sure if their organization has a heat protocol. And some said we don't, but we are, it's now a point of discussion to make one. So barriers mentioned for developing a heat protocol were mostly uncertainty about roles and responsibilities, legislation, and also a lack of capacity to develop one. And from the heat protocols we were sent, we noticed that there were sometimes specifications made for the specific protective clothing that were made available for the workers, but mostly it was just general recommendations. So drink enough water and protect yourself. And there was a beautiful example of a heat protocol that mapped in the city all the locations for cool resting points for the workers, for their own workers, and then also the workers that were working through tenders to the organizations. So it is sometimes, but not always, made clear what exact clothing is recommended and also what exact clothing is provided by the municipality. And we noticed that a lot of responsibility still laid in the was given to the workers to provide the clothing themselves, or it was not clear where they could find the protective clothing provided by the municipality. So in general, we noticed all heat protocols were quite different from each other. And it might be a good idea to have a more standardized protocol that could help more municipalities to have a heat protocol.
Thank you. This is how we build up our heat adaptation work in the Netherlands, just asking stupid questions to start with. And then it evolves to oh, there's apparently nothing there, how to organize that. So that's how we got within 5 years now 120 municipalities, so 1/3 of the country who has a local heat health action plan, but nothing for their own workers. So for most of them. So that's the kind of next level of engagement that we try to use these kind of webinars for to move forward. This is, for example, also how we ask the question, when we are in the energy transition, do you recognize that we will need more cooling? As you said, Mamen, air conditioning is the best solution, but from a mitigation point of view and climate change, it's a problematic solution. So that's how we build up our knowledge and our engagement in change of organizations and settings, and as you said, also lawmaking and agreements there. Thank you, Helene. And now we have another 15 minutes, and I'd like to start with Jan Popma, who has been writing on this topic for a number of years and studying in it. And I ask you in particular to, based on the presentations, to give some observations from your interest and knowledge, where we are on this topic.
Yes, thank you for having me, Madeleine. My name is Jan Popma. I'm a researcher, or I used to be a researcher at the Vrije Universiteit in the Netherlands, and I was also a participant in the Adapt Heat project, and I can share information on that. I think it's very valuable information for people who are trying to protect workers. And I was very pleased with the presentations, both by Matthijs and Mamen. Mamen, tu inglés es mejor de mi español, so don't worry about it. And and also Nacho, who I've known for quite some years. I think the three presentations actually encompassed clearly mostly all of that there has to be said. So I'm going to address just some minor points. First, I try to put it on this page, and then I thought to get a message through, you have to only do 3 messages, and it's there. And I think that one of the most interesting points is was raised by Matthijs, that we should have this topic higher on the agenda. There's a lot of information known to experts, but also disseminating now to the general public that heat is actually a problem, but there is little action. This was one of the findings of my research in the Netherlands. Clearly, the Netherlands is quite a cool country, climatologically, but still there needs to be done a lot. And I think that one of the strategies that Matthijs addressed is try to make it a business case. Because when we just say people are going to suffer dearly from heat at work, many employers will not be too impressed, I think. So we need other communication strategies and a business case approach, and another communication strategy would be to compare with road accidents. There are a lot more people dying from heat at work than during car accidents. And everyone will admit that car safety is an important issue. And if you compare it to road accidents, you could maybe get death at work due to heat at work higher on the agenda. So that would be one of the observations I've made to the presentation of Matthijs. Second, I think, and I come from a legal background, and also in my papers, I stress the importance of some legal aspects that need to be dealt with when you try to make either legislation or collective labor agreements, or as we have in the Netherlands, so-called OSH catalogs. And these are agreements between employers, organizations, and trade unions on how to deal with the topic. And I made an analysis of the 60 OSH catalogs that were drafted in the Netherlands. And what Helene said about the communities, what I've seen in the OSH catalogs was very much very general recommendations. So we need more specificity concerning the recommendations. And for that reason, I think we should have, first of all, very clear standards. And I saw it on the presentation of Matthijs. He made a reference to ISO standard 7243. It's not about heat only. It's about heat, humidity, air temperature, radiation, and it should all be in a clear standard for heat at work that applies to all workers, because workers in agriculture are as valuable as workers in construction or workers in the municipalities. So, and as Nacho already addressed, the employers are not very willing to have one legal standard, and I think there should be one in a clear directive devoted to heat at work. And that also entails the notion of equality, entails that there should be one European standard and not specific standards for every sector or every collective labor agreement, because I also made an analysis of the Dutch collective labor agreements, and they were all different, and they all had different thresholds. Anyway, that's two. I said to myself, I can only have 3 messages, but I'm going to make 5.
No, you don't have the time for 5. Make it 3.
Make it 3. Okay. Yeah. Also, because of the time is running out, I think one of the key elements, and I'm a researcher not only in occupational health and safety, but also in work participation. I think that one of the key elements is the right to self-protection of workers. And Nacho also already mentioned the right to withdrawal. And he also mentioned, and I think that was also in the presentations of Mamen and Matthijs, the need for monitoring, but monitoring specifically in the way it was presented by Nacho, medical monitoring, is too late. Every worker should have the right to wear sensors to monitor in real time the core temperature in the situation they are working with. There are some examples of that, and I think they should be spread more widely, and workers should have the right to protect themselves by wearing some of these sensoring devices. And as Madeleine is very strict on my limiting myself to 3, I'll keep it to here and also leave room for questions from the audience.
And now all of us are so curious what 4 and 5 will be.
Yes, but I'm not going to tell you.
No, I know.
No. What I think is very important is there is a lot of information, and there is a desperate need of a common body of knowledge. So I would suggest that someone will take the initiative to build a library of something of some sort in this field and bring together all the information we have. And we do have EU OSHA, as already mentioned by Nacho, but it might also be a good idea for your organization.
Thank you so much, Jan, for your observations and advice. I'm myself, because I was engaged in that, the local heat health action plans, which took time because first all of us, many more countries have national heat health action plans after 2 big heat waves of 2003 and 2006, focusing on people living at home, the elderly, as I said before, as we started. And we moved from the national heat health action plan because we still saw that people were dying, towards local heat health action plan to organize more local organizations who are closer to the target group, so to say. And it first in 2019, first municipality had it. More public health services got engaged, and only since more and more provinces also took it up to support it. Within 3-4 years, we moved from 1 to 120, and a lot of the approaches were just having a copy and continue copying it, which is not a good enough level, not enough quality, but quantitatively you set up the systems, and then you can improve from having the protocols and by the knowledge that you have. Heat every year is now an annual risk, and the scientists say heat is the 100% sure climate change related risk as well. So I'm looking also, having heard the conversations, that one end you learn how many more aspects are part of it. At the same time, how limited our capacities, and can you set up organization-wise in a simple way so many can engage and then improve quality along the way and the years to come. I'm looking for Matthijs, Ignacio, and Mamem as well. What do you think of that approach? Matthijs.
Yes, it's really complex. It's difficult to set up like one set of rules that everyone should engage. What we saw is that like an overall legislation or set of data helps because it gives you the information you need. It's a good starting point, but you always need to be specific on the type of job and the region. So the work we're going to do in the Netherlands this summer will be usable and replicable for Germany, the UK, Belgium, etc. in the same sector. But not if you look at another sector, or not if you start looking at the south of France. So it helps to start building awareness and knowledge. But then if you go down and you start working on the ground with people, you also need to talk to the people, to the workers themselves. What do you need? How do you feel? And be aware and responding to what Jan said about real-time measuring, that can be done. That the technology already exists. It takes a lot of effort to organize it. It's more an organizational challenge nowadays than that we still need to find out what needs to be done. We know what works and what needs to be done. The way to organize it, that's more difficult. So thinking in this way that you were talking about, that really helps us forward, I think.
Mamen, any comment on that, on the next steps and how to organize and whether...
Los próximos pasos y cómo organizarse.
Vale, en principio nosotros lo que estamos haciendo es protocolo, que es aquello que las empresas tengan su protocolo y el protocolo propio de cada empresa tendrá que estar basado en la evaluación de riesgos de cada empresa.
Yeah, so the way the trade unions are working is protocol by protocol. So step by step in each company, in each workplace, because there needs to be an assessment made for each situation, and so then it's just done like this piece by piece, building a larger structure with the small pieces of each protocol.
Que las medidas de prevención generales pueden servir, pero no son eficaces al final.
Yeah, it's good to have a general coverage and a minimum coverage for everybody, but it's not effective it's not effectively translated individually for each situation. So in order to cover for each worker's situations, then that's why the risk assessment needs to be conducted for each company and each workplace to make sure that it gives coverage for that situation.
Y explica que los protocolos estamos intentando que se adapten a las temperaturas a lo largo del verano, que cuando hay olas de calor, unas medidas, cuando no hay olas de calor, otras medidas.
Yeah, and we are also trying that the protocols are adaptive depending on the season, because the hot seasons are becoming longer and longer. So at the beginning of the season, when we're coming from colder weather, it's not the same as at the end of the season when there's already the strain of several months of heat, and so we are trying to make them adaptive and more flexible to cover all these cases.
Por eso no podemos utilizar una temperatura a partir de la cual digas hay que poner.
And that's why we cannot set an exact temperature and to say, okay, at this degrees, then that. No, it has to be reactive to the environment and the context.
De contexto y de la evaluación de riesgos.
And the context means a risk assessment of the situation, meaning that the place, but also the time.
Yeah. Thank you. Ignacio, the last word for you. Where do you see, where can we be within the next 3 years, Ignacio?
Yes, well, I believe, let me try to foretell the future and be optimistic that we will get this forward-looking piece of social legislation at European level, which will include strong provisions on the protection of workers against extreme weather events, particularly heat. So then what would be the next step? Member states will be obliged to implement that piece of legislation in their national legal systems. So as you can see, we truly believe that legislation is a driver of change. Of course, I agree that legislation then should be adapted to the sectoral and company circumstances. On this, I cannot agree more. But for this to happen, this legislation should also give a strong role to social partners, so trade unions and employers alike, to engage in negotiations so as to adapt those obligations to the company or sectoral context. So nobody's better placed than the employers and the trade unions, which are representatives in a sector or a company, to translate those general provisions into specific measures to protect workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, all of you, and all of the participants and listeners to this webinar. I think we touched on a very important new item within the heat adaptation community. And I would like to say thank you for being there. And I would like to ask the speakers to say a little bit longer and say goodbye to the listeners. Have a good weekend and a very good summer. It will be challenging, I think. Bye-bye.